Hello there, little masters, and welcome to the new weekly Prancing Pony podcast, where tonight we'll try to wake up something Tookish inside you.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, Owen to my glowing. How long can we keep changing these anyway? Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sean. Well, to answer your question, not much longer. We're running out of dwarves.
It's a very good point.
Well, there's only a finite number. Folks, hopefully you've heard our last episode by now, covering the first half of Chapter 1 of The Hobbit. If you haven't, go do that now, because tonight we're just going to pick up where we left off.
Yeah, it was actually just starting to get interesting last time, but I promise you it's going to be getting interesting really quick this time. I'm actually going to read some dwarvish poetry in a moment, so we'll see how interesting it gets.
Really? Interesting may not be the word for that, Sean. But we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see, indeed. But first, we have another new segment to introduce today, don't we, Alan? This is going to be the first installment of the Philology Faire segment.
That's right. If you're caught up on the first couple of episodes of Season 2, you know we've been talking about some new segments, which also come with new segment music. And this segment is going to give us a chance to really flex our word nerd muscles. Boy, that's a terrible phrase. I didn't know word nerd. I mean, don't word nerds not have muscles? That's kind of the point. That's why we're word nerds.
They have mental muscles.
Mental muscles. There you go.
The linguistic muscles.
I like that.
And I love that music. That music is exactly how excited I get about linguistics.
No reason not to get excited twice.
Yeah.
So, Sean, what have you got for us today?
Well, for the first installment of Philology Faire, I wanted to give us a little word nerdery that Tolkien gives us right at the beginning of the book, The Hobbit. We've already made a couple of jokes about it at the expense of Walt Disney. And
Poor Walt.
I'm speaking of, I know. And I am a fan. I like Disney stuff. So.
Fan or Walt, I mean, they kind of go together, apparently.
Oh, that's harsh. Now, I'm one of the few who likes Tolkien and Disney, though not equally.
Okay.
But no, I'm speaking, of course, of Tolkien's habit of using dwarves as the plural of dwarf instead of dwarfs,
Dwarfs,
Snow White and the
with the
Seven
F, right.
Dwarfs. And, for anybody who's been raised on modern fantasy literature and, role-playing games and things, maybe dwarves just sounds perfectly normal. I mean, it actually does for me. It's what I go to as the main plural of that. But in 1937, it was not normal at all.
No.
Tolkien really is responsible for popularizing it. It's worth noting that even his good friend C.S. Lewis, in the Narnia books, he uses dwarfs.
Now, I, of course, when I read that to my son, I edit that and turn it into dwarves.
Do you?
Yes.
That's good.
I do a lot of on-the-fly editing with that. His language is sometimes a little more archaic and also a little more provincial, I think. A lot, there's stuff that's very much more English that my son's just going to be. I want to avoid the, what is that at 8:30 at night when I'm trying to get him to go to sleep.
Yeah, no, I get that. That makes perfect sense. I'll have to try that. I just read straight what's on the page. Then again, my son's a little younger, and there's a lot that he doesn't understand anymore.
Yeah, that 1 year makes a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. But anyway, it wasn't common at all. Dwarves was not common at all. But where I'm going to go for the information on this is actually to the preface that now exists in certain editions of The Hobbit. It's not in all of them, but it is in Anderson's Annotated Hobbit, and it's in the Mariner Books paperback edition that we've been using right there on page 1. This preface was actually added in 1966, and in it, Tolkien talks about a few linguistic things, the use of the word goblin, the runes that are used, and the word dwarves. And he says, in English, the only correct plural of Let me start that over. In English, the only correct plural of dwarf is dwarfs, and the adjective is dwarfish. In this story, dwarves and dwarvish are used, but only when speaking of the ancient people to whom Thorin Oakenshield and his companions belonged.
Interesting. So he did it seems, to distinguish his dwarves from other uses of the term, like dwarfs of folklore, or a person with dwarfism, or like a red dwarf star.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And he explains it further in Appendix F to Lord of the Rings. He says, in this book, as in The Hobbit, the form dwarves is used, although the dictionaries tell us that the plural of dwarf is dwarfs. It should be dweros, or dweros, if singular and plural had each gone its way down the years, as have man and men, or goose and geese. Oh. But we no longer speak of a dwarf as often as we do of a man, or even of a goose, and memories have not been fresh enough among men to keep hold of a special plural for a race now abandoned to folktales, or at last to nonsense stories, in which they have become mere figures of fun. And what he's referring to there when he talks about them, the singular and plural going their separate ways, is he's talking about sound changes from Old English. In Old English, the singular was dwerg, and the plural was dwergas. And so very similar in Old English, but just the way that that final G changed over the centuries,
to the F
they just
or the V.
changed into it changed in different ways, and so that's why he's saying that the plural would have actually been dwarves.
Okay, so the changes over time that turned dwerg into our modern word dwarf should also have turned dwergas into dweros.
Exactly,
right? But it didn't, because there just weren't any people weren't talking about dwarves enough to keep an irregular plural.
Right, exactly. It's a word people don't use that much. So it just kind of becomes a standard plural. And Tolkien actually goes on to say in appendix F, he says, "But I have ventured to use the form dwarves and remove them a little, perhaps, from the sillier tales of these latter days." So he's doing it partly to kind of give his dwarves a little bit of their old dignity back. He's trying to separate them from these silly dwarfs, from Rumpelstiltskin to Sneezy, I guess. Interestingly, in an earlier letter, 1937 letter to Stanley Unwin, and this is letter number 17 in Carpenter's book.
Wow, that is early, yeah.
Yeah, very. Tolkien had actually explained it a little differently. He said, "I am afraid it is just a piece of private bad grammar." Rather shocking in a philologist. The real historical plural of dwarf, like teeth of tooth, is dwaros, anyway. Rather a nice word, but a bit too archaic. Still, I rather wish I had used the word dwaro.
I just get the feeling that Tolkien was just simply dead set on the form that he wanted to use because he knew it was more philologically correct, even though it wasn't grammatically correct for modern English. But of course, when he was set on something, that's usually the way it ended up being.
That is true. He was a man of convictions.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think you're right. And he knew that, the true philologically correct form, dwaro, was just a bit too archaic.
And too archaic for Tolkien, that's saying something.
Yeah, that is a very good point.
I mean, have you read the Silmarillion?
Right, exactly. So if he thought it was too archaic, definitely. He came up with this compromise form, dwarves, which, wharf and wharves, or, knife and knives. It sounds right.
Yeah.
And I would say it has arguably become the preferred form for dwarves in fantasy literature.
Oh, absolutely.
And doesn't even sound odd to us anymore. And that to me that's truly the work of a master philologist and language inventor.
Very good point. And that is some great stuff. Thank you for the Philology Faire piece. Love the news segment.
My
and
pleasure.
With that,
Thank
why
you.
don't we go ahead and get started with the second part of Chapter 1, An Unexpected Party. I believe we get to have you start this time with part leading into the Misty Mountains cold.
Yep. Okay, I'll just jump right in here. The dark came into the room from the little window that opened in the side of the hill. The firelight flickered. It was April, and still they played on, while the shadow of Gandalf's beard wagged against the wall. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on. And suddenly, first one and then another began to sing as they played, deep-throated singing of the dwarves in the deep places of their ancient homes. And this is like a fragment of their song, if it can be like their song without their music. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells in places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. As much as I would love to read this entire poem, I think it would just take way too long and
it
probably get some unhappy attention from the Tolkien estate. So I'll skip ahead a little bit here, and I'll actually just go back to the end, to the last two stanzas here. Let's see.
Okay.
The mountains smoked beneath the moon. The dwarves, they heard the tramp of doom. They fled their hall, to dying fall beneath his feet, beneath the moon. Far over the misty mountains grim, to dungeons deep and caverns dim, we must away ere break of day, to win our harps and gold from him.
Wow. Man, that's a potent piece of poetry.
That was an excellent...
I didn't even mean to alliterate.
An excellent instance of alliteration.
Oh, very well done.
But and I like starting at the first two stanzas and then reading the last two stanzas because you can see that change, in the far over the Misty Mountains line.
Before we even get to that, I actually wanted to say something about the passage before the poetry. There was a line that struck me that I don't know that it's really hit me before, that this is like a fragment of their song if it can be like their song without their music. The music is such an integral part of the piece that the narrator is telling us this really is an incomplete vision. That when you're hearing it just on the words, you're not hearing what it really is. And we get that because earlier, with Bilbo, let's see, where's the line that I'm thinking of here? Maybe it's after, where he has...
Which one's that?
No, right before that passage where the music began all at once, so sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else and was swept away.
Yeah.
That tells us how powerful the music itself, just the music is, even without the words. So
yeah, it reminds me just in the description of the the deep-throated singing and the effect that it has, sort of stopping everything. It reminds me of the Near Ninth Arnoriad. Remember when the dwarven the dwarven
when
lord
Azaghal.
Azaghal, he fell and and
fighting Glaurung. If I recall.
Oh yeah, you're right. And his men, just carried him off the battlefield singing this, this deep-throated dirge, and it just kind of like everybody just kind of left them alone.
We're not going to stop him. You want to stop him? I'm not going to stop him.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, this powerful effect that dwarvish singing has.
There's definitely some potency here. So now let's take a look then at the actual text.
Also an interesting construction here with the two references in two paragraphs to the dark coming into the room. This is just an interesting
The dark came
inversion.
into the room and then the dark filled all the room.
The dark filled the room. You would normally think of, the light coming into the room, maybe the moonlight coming into the room and then the moonlight filling the room. But here the dark filled the room, which is just
and
interesting.
that makes sense. We're not going to read that. It's not highlighted for us to read, but there's that little passage later about we like the dark for dark business.
Yeah.
That's there's definitely some powerful symbolism here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this poem, I mean, although I would have loved to read it all, but
of course
didn't for various reasons. But I think I want to spend some
logistical
time on
and legal.
What's that?
Logistical and legal.
Yes, exactly right.
We try not to violate copyright here on the Branson Cody podcast.
Absolutely.
But we want to discuss all of it, including the stanzas that we didn't read.
Definitely.
We want to take a really close look at the text and see just what this means. So I'll let you start. I'm sure you've got something already off the top of your head.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the first stanza is sort of introductory. It's kind of talking about the quest.
Right.
And that is informed later on by that last stanza. But, we get right off the bat that it's, they're going to seek the enchanted gold. They're very clear on their goal here. It's not so much about revenge against the dragon as it is about the treasure. At least at this point. That's
the last verse
on.
suggests that. I mean, to win our harps and gold from him, you're not going to.
I think later on, there's a comment Thorin makes. They're doing okay, but they still want their ancestral home back.
They absolutely do.
But that is kind of an interesting thing. But really, it's the second stanza that really starts to interest me.
That's when we start to learn about the dwarves, isn't it?
Yeah, the dwarves of yore and these spells they wrought in their craftsmanship, and they really celebrate the craftsmanship.
They do.
Talking about the hammers falling like ringing bells, and
we'll get so much more of that in these other stanzas. The shaped and wrought. The twisted wire and the fact that they hung these flowering stars on crowns. All of this that's my favorite. About what they do.
That is my favorite stanza. Is that on silver necklaces they strung because of just the way that they're stringing the stars. They're meshing the light of the moon and the sun. They're hanging dragon fire. It's all figurative language, but figuratively speaking, they're talking about mastery over over the earth. Mastery over light and mastery over dragon fire and metals and gems. Yeah. And it's just such a powerful statement of control and power that they had before they were driven from their home.
Exactly.
I love that.
It really is. But we get some foreboding there in that second stanza about that where they did this was in deep places where dark things sleep and in hollow halls beneath the fells.
Yeah.
where dark things sleep. Certainly, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is Durin's Bane. We don't even see that in this entire book, but that has to be in the back of the mind of Professor Tolkien as he's penning this.
Could be.
That there are indeed dark things in these places.
Even if he wasn't thinking of Durin's Bane specifically.
No.
But he's thinking of some Balrogs that were deep below the earth.
Yeah, or even just, horrible creatures like the Watching Water or things like that.
Yeah, true.
This is interesting in the third stanza about the ancient king and elvish lord, that they shaped and wrought these golden hoards.
For kings and lords. Everybody wanted their wares.
Exactly. They were
every other race wanted dwarvish craftsmanship.
For ancient king and elvish lord. So we're talking about men and elves. They do their job.
I think we have to assume ancient king means men.
I think so, because it's ancient king and elvish lord.
Yep.
I mean, it's not. Yeah. It's not like for elvish lord and ancient king. Then you might.
And we're talking about the dwarves in general,
so
it wouldn't be a dwarvish king. So.
No.
Yep.
No. I agree. And so they make arms, the hilt of the swords, and they shape and wrought these things. And like you said, it's this mastery. It's this demonstration of, absolute superior craftsmanship. Nobody can do it better.
Yeah.
I mean, why would the elves go to the
almost
dwarves
even
for this?
it's almost even just a figurative mastery of the natural world in a way. The way they're talking. I guess I mentioned
that's certainly part of Aule's. That's kind of his thing.
This is how they interact with the world. This is how they show their supremacy, is by doing these crafts that only they can do.
Yeah. And then after those verses, including your favorite, so after the fourth stanza, we get a repeat almost of the first one, right? We get far over the misty mountains cold, dungeons deep and caverns old. Same exact first two lines, first three. The only difference is, instead of seeking the pale enchanted gold, they're claiming their long forgotten gold.
Yep.
Who's forgotten it? Because it's not them.
They certainly have not forgotten it. That's true.
No, I mean, is this just to say that, nobody else remembers that this was ours?
I wonder. I wonder if there's an like an archaic meaning of forget that Tolkien is playing on here. I don't know.
I do not know. Maybe that's something we can delve into in our postscript.
Yeah. I don't know.
Folks,
Probably not,
I mentioned the postscript, but I'll just mention that as an aside for most of our listeners. There are a few of you who are part of the fellowship of the podcast, but one of the things we're starting to do now for our patrons is provide a 5 to 10 minute postscript for every episode, where we touch on questions and issues and mistakes and bad jokes that we missed and all sorts of things. So if you want to get in,
opportunities missed.
Yeah, exactly. Opportunities missed. Like, how did I miss that pun? Yeah. Those are a great chance. If you guys want to kind of dive into that, those are available at the Gift of Gondor level or higher, so you don't have to pitch in a bunch. But if you want to join up with the Fellowship of the Podcast, you'll get some access to that. So anyway, just a sidebar.
Long forgotten gold, but the claim is what's really key there.
Yes.
They're not going to seek; they're going to claim. They know where to look for it.
and then what do we do when that same passage with slightly different words is given again after 4 more stanzas? It's then to win.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's first it's to seek, then it's to claim, and then it's to win. So there's definitely a pattern that's worth looking at.
Yeah.
So then we see more craftsmanship. They carve goblets for themselves and golden harps, and they do this where no man goes.
That's really key. Man delves, and they sing these songs that are unheard by men or elves. That's just another reminder that, they're in a place that nobody else can go.
Yeah.
This is a place that,
and they're a little bit. This also reminds us of their isolationist nature. They're not. They don't trust the other races, and part of that goes all the way back to what we talked about from chapter 2 with their origin. These were not originally the children of Iluvatar. And as such, there's going to be conflict with the original children. So
I think you're right. I think it's twofold. I think it's partly that they don't want men or elves there. I think it's also they're sort of touting the fact that whether
nobody
accurate or not, that nobody
there.
else has the guts to go this deep.
Yeah. and yet they're singers. This is just like we learned by listening to this and realizing they're not reciting poetry, they're singing a song. Mm-hmm. We're told that they're singing songs that have been unheard by men or elves.
Yeah.
They're not just craftsmen, they're artists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's important. But then we get what appears to be the arrival of the dragon in the next 3 stanzas.
Oh, yeah.
We get the destruction, essentially, of Erebor. Mm-hmm. We get the great stanza that's actually musically in the film, that the pines were roaring on the height, that stanza. And there is, the winds and the red fire and the flames spreading and the trees burning like torches.
Like torches blazed with light, yeah.
Vivid imagery, really. And there's no mention, really, of Smaug himself.
Of the dragon in this
Smaug
stanza.
has done. Yeah.
You really get a sense of, seeing the fire and seeing the effect that is coming before you you get a sense of
see him.
Before you realize what hit you,
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, it's not like, Smaug did these things. I mean, even when the dragon is mentioned, it's not himself, it's his ire.
He's not the subject, it is his ire that is the subject of that.
Right.
The dragon's ire laid low their
Exactly.
powers.
Yeah. So
isn't that interesting?
Isn't it? Yeah.
The dragon's ire more fierce than fire. It wasn't his fire, it was the anger and the hatred in his heart that led him to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was what laid low their towers and houses. It's beautiful. It's so poetic.
It is. It's really it's easy to skim over this poem the first time you read it. And again, it's probably because, and I say this because I've had the tendency to skim over the poems before. I don't do that anymore, like we talked about. Hello, my name is Alan. I'm a recovering prose reader.
Recovering poem skipper. Certainly not after our last Tolkien Reading Day episode where we spent so much time on the poetry.
That's absolutely right. But when you're young and maybe you're like, I just want to get on with the story, you miss so much when you do that.
Yeah.
And this really, when you dig in, it really rewards that sort of deep exploration.
Well, it's, poetry's not always the easiest thing to crack, especially if you're young. You're a teenage fantasy geek, you're picking up this book. You're how many pages in and suddenly you're hit with all this poetry. And it's not the easiest thing to parse. No. I remember,
forget it. I'm just going to go back to my 5th edition source book and, prepare for my next campaign.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Roll some dice. Something I can control.
Exactly.
Something I can understand. But yeah, I think for me, I've told you this before, I did read the poems on the first maybe 1 or 2 times, but then I did get to a point eventually where I started skipping, on rereads just because I want to get to the good part. I want to get to Rivendell, stuff like that.
Yeah. So. And those lovely tra-la-la-lally elves.
I love them. I love them. I can't wait.
Upon which you have called dibs.
I have called dibs. But it's just such a beautiful poem, and I think it's so worth reading because it's such good exposition in a way that doesn't distract you. It doesn't it doesn't bore you.
No, I agree. And we
really
get one last verse of destruction. Right now, we get to see what happens with the dwarves. First, in that previous verse, previous stanza, it was about the men and how the town of Dale was destroyed, and now the dwarves hear the footsteps of doom, the tramp of doom. That was the footsteps of doom. That was, who said that in the Lord of the Rings? Is that a Galadriel line?
Yeah, you're coming to us as the footstep of doom.
Footsteps of doom. So they fled their hall to dying fall beneath his feet. Beneath the moon. So, this is finally, we start to see what the dragon has done to the dwarves. He's not just stolen their stuff. He's killed them and he's pushed them out of their home. And now they go. The mountains are no longer cold; they're grim, and the caverns are not just old; they're dim. And now, instead of seeking or claiming, they're now going to win their harps and gold from him.
And not just their gold, but their harps and their gold.
Absolutely, and I thought that was cool because Thorin's playing a harp at this moment.
Yeah.
But that's another
and so
thing
it's not,
they made.
And so that tells you that it's not just about the treasure. It's not just about the money. It's about their culture.
Yeah.
A harp is a symbol of culture. It's their
music.
The harp is the symbol of their music, their poetry, and their culture has been taken from them.
Absolutely.
They have it. They're a culture in diaspora. I think we've talked about that.
Right.
But they have lost their place. They've lost and they've lost a bit of themselves, and they want that back. They're going to take it back.
Absolutely. Can't say I blame him. I'm actually going to pick up immediately after that and read the next paragraph in a few lines.
Okay.
As they sang, the hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him, a fierce and a jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something Tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window. The stars were out in a dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels of the dwarves shining in dark caverns. Suddenly, in the wood beyond the water, a flame leapt up, probably somebody lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was plain Mr. Baggins of Bag End under hill again. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp, and more than half a mind to pretend to, and go and hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not come out again until all the dwarves had gone away. I love that.
Man. He's so close to
the Took part lasts for like 10 seconds.
Right. And then suddenly he remembers the peril again. The idea that, there could be actual loss
danger.
Loss of life.
Danger,
and
Will
flames.
Robinson, danger.
Right. Yeah, right.
The plundering dragons, and he's, well, that'll bring you right back. I mean, all
it's
it
like,
was somebody lighting
a
wood fire. You got somebody starting a bonfire on the other side of the river. And it absolutely freaks him out.
Yeah. Well, given the dark, given the mood, hey, who can blame him?
Sure. I love, though, the effect of the music on him that we get at the beginning of that passage, that he starts to feel that desire of the hearts of dwarves. And it's
fierce
what is
and
that desire?
love.
It is fierce and jealous, right? I mean, and we'll see that later with Thorin. It's more jealous than anything else. But
yeah,
what is it? It's the love of these beautiful, crafted things. Really, in a way, the first thing that comes to my mind is that's a little Feanor-like in the sense that there's this love of objects made by hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love of craftsmanship, which is okay, to start with. It's how far does that go?
Yeah.
But yeah, that impact that he
fierce
actually
and jealous
starts
is
to,
certainly, that certainly sounds like it's going overboard. But
yeah, it does.
But you're right. I mean, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it.
No.
It's all about
just do not love too much the work of your hands, right?
Right, exactly.
It's the same thing. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. It's not money that's the root of all evil.
Not money itself, right? Yes.
It's the same kind of thing. Craftsmanship is good, and and certainly even appreciating craftsmanship is fine. But when you have a fierce and jealous love, it's a dangerous thing. Mm-hmm. So we see the Tookish side wake up. Here's that conflict again, right? Coming back to one of the main themes of the book, the Baggins and Took sides. We see the Took side wakes up, and what happens? Wants to go and see the mountains and explore, the pine trees and the waterfalls.
The caves.
I love this. He wants to wear a sword. He doesn't want to use a sword. In fact, we'll find that later on, the very thought of using a sword is very alien to him and like last resort sort of thing.
Well, it's interesting. He wants adventure. He's craving adventure here.
He is. He's craving.
He wants to go and see things. He wants to explore. He wants to hear things that he's never heard before.
But not danger. He's not willing
and
to
not
face
fighting.
danger.
I would say. He doesn't want to go out and he doesn't dream of valor.
He wants to look like an explorer. He wants to be an explorer, perhaps, but he doesn't want to have to risk life or limb.
Yeah, this isn't Eowyn who just wants to win valor at the point of a sword. He just wants to see the world.
Yeah, he just wants to wear it in a sheath on his belt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it doesn't take much for him to come right back.
No. Before we get to that, I love the mention of the stars. He notices the stars.
Yes.
And that makes me think of chapter 3, which
we'll see that shortly.
When he's we'll get to that soon. But
we can spoil it a little bit. I mean,
everybody's read the book, so
right.
Yeah, there's the part when he's coming into Rivendell and he's they're riding down into the valley, and Bilbo looks up and he sees the stars, and that's when he says one of my favorite lines. It smells like elves.
I love that.
But he notices the stars, and it's just the idea of experiencing the world. And when we think of what the stars signify to elves and to Tolkien's legendarium in general, I think it's really, really a key thing that they're mentioned here. But
I also think it helps him
they're
get
likened to
beyond
the jewels.
Exactly. That
There
does.
won't
It
be
reminds him of the
jewels.
jewels. Yeah. I was going to say that they also make me think of how the stars always kind of make me a little bit humble. They make me realize how small I am.
Oh, yeah.
It's that total perspective vortex from Hitchhiker's Guide.
From Hitchhiker's Guide, yeah.
And really, that comes
You
back.
are here.
You are here, you know.
Giant map of the entire galaxy and a
yeah.
little tiny microscopic dot that says you
all
are
of
here.
infinity, and then teeny dot. You were here. But it makes me, we talked yesterday, we talked in the last episode about how small Bilbo's world is, the hill, the water. The stars are the one thing that makes it bigger. I think they're the one thing that kind of, in a way, forces Bilbo to realize there's so much more out there.
Yeah, that's true.
But just that realization is enough to start to create a sense of danger so much so that when a single fire leaps up, he kind of loses it.
He suddenly thinks of dragons again, yeah.
But look at who he becomes. Plain Mr. Baggins. So there's where the Took side is gone. Baggins is back. Of Bag End, under hill again. Mm-hmm. But that last line is awesome. This is another one of those, like in The Lord of the Rings, that line about, I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Mm-hmm. I know more than, This is the same thing. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp and more than half a mind to pretend to.
Yeah.
But what he didn't want was darkness anymore.
Right.
He wanted to go and hide in the cellar, presumably where the light is, where the lamp is.
And where the beer is, it must be said.
And where the beer is, because his comfort's there, right?
Yes,
he wants
exactly.
to be comfortable again.
Yep, exactly.
But he wants the lamp. He wants some light. Mm-hmm. He's finding that the dark is now oppressive.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
He wants to escape it. Yep.
Yeah. So, and that's when the dwarves are all telling, no, we like the dark.
Yeah.
So, you're going to stay right here.
Dark for dark business.
Yeah, exactly. So Thorin's speech. We're not going to read all of this. In fact, I don't think we read any of this for a little bit, right?
No, I'm going to be picking up right after.
Yeah, exactly. So we get this really bloviating style, to put it.
Completely, yeah. I mean, we
So
get in the
over the
passage
top.
I'm about to read that Thorin is a very important dwarf, and he is he's so aware of his own importance.
He's so self-important. He's so flowery in his speech for no apparent purpose.
Yeah,
Arguably, he's being sarcastic. I mean, really, given what he's said and what he's seen so far, to say things like the most
estimable
excellent
Mr.
and
Baggins.
audacious Hobbit, and really, you don't know anything about this guy.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon you're going to be, ripping him. So I'm not sure that's really what you think.
Yeah, that's interesting that he could actually be being sarcastic.
I wonder. He certainly is later. I don't know if he's sarcastic at this point. He might still being, he might be basing
I know
this
the part
on
you're thinking
Gandalf's
of.
opinion.
Yeah, he's definitely sarcastic later on.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful.
At this point,
wonderful part.
he's probably just sort of tongue in cheek, like okay, let's see what this guy's all about.
Exactly, and seeing how he'll
And
respond.
interestingly, referring to him as audacious and referring to him as fellow conspirator has exactly the effect probably that Thorin wants, which is to just completely
get him all
flummox Bilbo.
flummoxed, which is another synonym, another antonym to comfortable.
For comfortable, yeah.
I think that reminds me. I think the last episode I used the word synonym when I meant antonym. So,
Did you?
Yeah, I'm just correcting myself now.
Okay.
Or I should say amending. Because I don't have to
we don't make any mistakes to correct. We just amend what we previously said.
We just make amendments.
I heard you say antonym correctly at least once.
Okay, I think once. Yeah, I was listening to it the other day, prepping for our postscript, and thinking, did I just say synonym when I meant antonym? I think I might have.
Yeah.
But perhaps I was saying synonyms for uncomfortable, which may be the case. But
I think that's probably what it was.
So I love this line here about we're met to discuss our plans, our ways, means, policy, and devices. Is that like the most lawyerly talk you've ever heard?
I
mean, this is
know.
coming from a former lawyer, but I mean, I'm hearing it's like it makes me think of do not fold, bend, spindle, mutilate.
It's so overwrought, it's,
It really is. Overwrought's a good way of putting it. He just goes on and on.
Again,
He says in those two full long paragraphs what could have been said in one simple line.
Yeah.
Which is, all right, well, let's get this.
All right, let's get down
this
to
show
business.
on the road. We've got a tough task ahead of us. Boom.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but he takes two long paragraphs, very flowery speech.
So I'm going to let you pick up where we marked for you to read.
Okay, so this is right at the end of Thorin's dialogue, and picking up from the next paragraph there. This was Thorin's style. He was an important dwarf. If he had been allowed, he would probably have gone on like this until he was out of breath, without telling anyone there anything that was not known already. But he was rudely interrupted. Poor Bilbo couldn't bear it any longer. At "may never return," he began to feel a shriek coming up inside, and very soon it burst out like the whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel. All the dwarves sprang up, knocking over the table. Gandalf struck a blue light on the end of his magic staff, and in its firework glare the poor little hobbit could be seen kneeling on the hearthrug, shaking like a jelly that was melting. Then he fell flat on the floor, and kept on calling out, "Struck by lightning! Struck by lightning!" over and over again. And that was all they could get out of him for a long time. So they took him and laid him out of the way on the drawing-room sofa with a drink at his elbow, and they went back to their dark business.
To their dark business. I love that whole sequence. That is
It's
just
such a
comedy
great paragraph.
gold.
Such a great paragraph.
The movie version was okay, with Bilbo kind of reading
kinda
things
like
and then fainting.
Passing out, yeah.
And it was a fantastic feint, I will admit.
It was, yeah.
Oh, nope.
Martin Freeman is a master, yeah.
He really does that well. But the idea of him shrieking and saying "struck by lightning" is just hilarious while he's shaking like a jelly.
Yeah.
One thing I just want to address the potential anachronism. Well, it's not potential; it's a real anachronism where he talks about the whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel. I mean, you and I can immediately picture and hear that. Certainly, that doesn't fit in the storyline.
World. Yeah.
Right, but we do have to remember, like the elephant anachronism we had earlier, where he talks about how hobbits can hide when big folk like us go stomping around like elephants. This is a word used by the narrator to the reader, so it's not something used by Bilbo. So it's a little less anachronistic. It's more a modern telling of an old story, right?
Right. It's a translation. Again, he's translating it. He's putting it into terms that are meaningful to us because we are the audience,
and especially a younger audience.
Yeah.
Now we will see, or we have already seen, true anachronism with Bilbo talking about, it's a great morning for a pipe full of tobacco. And we'll see elephant again in the next chapter, and this time I think it is actually said by one of the characters, said by Gandalf, I believe. So, we do see some of those. But I wanted to point that one out.
This one works just fine for me. I mean, it's a bit jarring if you've read the Silmarillion first. If you've been following along with us, the style is totally different. Even Lord of the Rings doesn't have anything anachronistic like this. But
no,
that's okay. I'm totally okay with this.
Exactly.
I know this does kind of bug some people, but
it fits the style. It's a style thing.
Exactly. This work is just more translated. It's more accessible for kind of a mainstream audience or just an ordinary modern audience.
Well, and with all the asides that we get from the narrator to the reader, it's very different in a narrative style. You're not reading a book written by someone else for people in that same era to read.
Right.
You're being told a story that happened long in the past. I mean, he might as well have said long, long ago. And he did, right? He talks about back when the world was more green and there were more trees and this kind of thing. And when hobbits were more numerous. So he does say, a long time ago. Far
exactly.
away.
The whole thing is written from the perspective of the present, looking back.
Exactly, and that makes this kind of anachronism okay.
Yep, I agree.
So I do like the idea of seeing Bilbo shaking like a jelly. So
definitely.
Very good stuff.
And I just love, the matter of fact, well, that was all they could get out of him for a long time. So they just kind of moved him out of the way and
all the guy says is struck by lightning. Let's go give him a drink
next to him and he went back to it. It's so
because
funny.
Apparently that's what he needs. He always needs a drink.
Yeah.
Again, I'm thinking Bilbo needs to talk to somebody.
Yeah. He still hasn't had that drink. He still wants that one. No. I have no idea how many drinks he's had at this point.
Who knows?
Probably takes
not
a lot
enough. The
to
answer
get
is
through
not
this
enough.
Wednesday.
It's the most awkward Wednesday he ever remembers. It's going to become the most hungover Thursday he's ever going to remember.
He's going to need two breakfasts to get over it.
There you go. Oh, goodness. So then we get that line about the dragon in a pinch, which is, an idiom, a wonderful idiom. And the narrator explains that to us, that it is poetical exaggeration. and that's the thing. We need to. There's another thing like that, another dragon in a pinch sort of line. I think that Bilbo talks about later that we'll get to. Hint: it has to do with worms. So
I know the one you're thinking of.
Yeah, and it's poetical exaggeration too. But I do like the little sidebar on this little sidebar about Golfimble. I love this wonderful origin myth of the game of golf. It is phenomenal. I wish we had more of these kinds of things.
I know. This is such a fun one.
I love it. Golfimble.
This is a really fun one. Golfimble. Yeah.
Now, great granduncle. So old Took.
Did you know that it wasn't originally Golfimble in the earliest draft? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember who it was.
If I'm not mistaken, it was originally Fingolfin.
He
was originally going to name the goblin Fingolfin. Yeah.
Okay. Well, of course, it has to have something with the name Golfin.
Right. Exactly. But just an interesting connection between King Golfimble and our good friend Fingolfin from the Silmarillion.
That is hilarious. That really is. So Bullroarer, I love that name, by the way, Bullroarer.
Oh, it's so great, yeah.
What a great name. And big enough that he can ride a horse. So, the average Hobbit is what, 3 foot, 3'6", I think, somewhere in that range?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
So, to be big enough to ride a horse, he's got to at least be, what, almost 4.5 feet, I would guess.
Yeah.
Can't imagine riding a horse really any smaller than that. So he's out there charging the ranks, knocked the head clean off with a wooden club, which, well, frankly, come on, really? Physics makes me think that's not going to happen. It sailed 100 yards. We were having this discussion actually recently at an event where they were setting up a game of Golfimble. And there was like a little goblin head on a traffic cone, and you'd hit it and towards towards a rabbit. Yeah, it was at the Baggins birthday bash put on by the OneRing.net.
Oh, okay.
And so to those of you who were there, hello. We ended up not doing the game because of the wind, but we were discussing, was it sailed 100 feet or sailed 100 yards? Oh, it had to have been only 100 feet. You couldn't make a head sail 100 yards. Well, there it is.
So I'm sorry, I've never seen the game. I've never seen Golfimble played before. So I've seen golf, but so they actually put a goblin's head on a stick?
They have a goblin's head that's, like the size of a softball on a like a traffic cone sort of tee, and then you would hit it. And I guess the object, because we didn't play because it was windy, the object is to get it as close as possible to this little rabbit.
Okay, but you're just hitting it with a stick, right?
Yeah, you're hitting it with a stick, not with
because it sounds like Aunt Sally if you were actually throwing the stick at the head.
Exactly, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's like Aunt Sally. No, but you do have to bring your own horse, and you charge. No, there's no horse involved. You just hit it like a baseball thing.
Maybe you guys just put a broomstick between your legs, like Quidditch or something.
Oh, like what's that? There's some. I've seen this thing on the internet with these kids pretending to ride a horse, and it's a broomstick, and it's take it off. They're like, it's the weirdest thing.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just going to leave that right there because I don't remember like in what country this is becoming popular, but it's an unusual thing. I will maybe look it up just for fun, during one of your reads or something. But so golf.
Well, we digress.
Golf. I love this.
Yeah.
It's such a fun way to invent a sport, and I kind of wish that we'd find that they invented hockey or they invented soccer or they invented some other game. I'd love to find out how that happened, but. Oh goodness. So Bilbo kind of gets his act together after he has a drink. And he hears Glowin kind of talking bad about him behind his back, going, well, all he needs to do is shriek like that once and we're all dead. I'm pretty sure we came to the wrong house. And that's where we get the famous line about looking more like a grocer than a burglar.
Yep.
But this is where the Took side comes out again. I'm going to read these next couple of paragraphs. Then Mr. Baggins turned the handle and went in. The Took side had won. He suddenly felt he would go without bed and breakfast to be thought fierce. As for little fellow bobbing on the mat, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins part regretted what he did now, and he said to himself, "Bilbo, you were a fool. You walked right in and put your foot in it." "Pardon me," he said, "if I have overheard words that you were saying. I don't pretend to understand what you are talking about or your reference to burglars, but I think I am right in believing," this is what he called being on his dignity, that you think I am no good. I will show you. I have no signs on my door. It was painted a week ago, and I am quite sure you have come to the wrong house. As soon as I saw your funny faces on the doorstep, I had my doubts. But treat it as the right one. Tell me what you want done, and I will try it if I have to walk from here to the east of east and fight the wild wereworms in the last desert. I had a great-great-great-granduncle once, Bullroarer Took, and oh,
That's great.
Man. Being on his dignity.
I like that. I like that.
I do.
It's such a nice little hobbity phrase, he's being
Isn't
on his
it?
dignity.
It's a very proper sort of thing. It's the propriety deal again.
Yeah, well, he has dignity. He's going to keep his dignity. He's already been made uncomfortable by this whole experience, and his courtesy has the veneer of his courtesy has broken a little bit.
Mr. Baggins, the courtesy of your hole is lessened of late. Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
That is an awful
That is
pun.
a terrible, terrible pun.
Yeah. Oh man, but he is going to insist on keeping his dignity, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
And it's interesting that this is the second time that we get that. I'm going to just go back a few sentences. The little fellow bobbing on the mat bit. This is the second time we see that it's a specific phrase that kind of triggers something in him that makes
really gets
that he
him
reacts
mad.
to. Yeah. That makes him really fierce.
He kind of reminds me of Marty McFly. He's just waiting for somebody to call him chicken, and then he just loses it.
Yeah.
Little fellow bobbing on the mat. There's your Back to the Future reference, folks, for those of you
very
who
good. I can't believe it's taken us 50
seriously
episodes
50 plus episodes to get there.
Yeah.
I love how we get the very clear delineation between the Took side and the Baggins side.
Oh,
right?
yes.
The Took side wins, and that's where the fierceness comes from. But I love that the Baggins part regrets it.
Yeah.
Like you were an
many
idiot.
a time afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we'll see many of those times. A lot of those times will be called out very specifically.
Yeah.
Others will have to infer, but definitely be able to see. I love the idiom at the end of the thing, though, about fighting the wild wereworms. Let's just be clear, that's what we call hyperbole and poetical exaggeration.
Do you mean to say there aren't really wereworms in the last desert?
I'm not
Do you
even
mean to
sure
say there really aren't Fremen out there somewhere?
Fremen. We have worm sign.
We have worm sign, the likes of which Eru has never seen.
Eru has never seen.
Yeah.
I mean, do any of the hobbits actually know where the last desert even is?
I'm not sure.
Of east. I mean, this is.
Who knows if there is a last desert?
Exactly.
East of east. I mean, it's. It
This
sounds
is
like East
like
of Eden or
saying-
something. It's a phrase. It's like you said. It's a hyperbolic phrase for someplace really far away. Yeah.
I'd walk 1,000 miles for a burger.
Right.
That good.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Right.
No, you're not.
Right. Yep.
Or I'd go to the moon for that. Well, okay, that's more, even clearly impossible.
Right. Yeah. Nothing to suggest that the wereworms are real.
No.
Unfortunately.
And certainly not like that. The Battle of the Five Armies fiasco.
Yep.
Oh,
man.
Goodness.
It's funny that he goes straight to Bullroarer Took too.
Yes.
Bullroarer
Well, he's probably
Took.
the only.
He's
He's
probably
probably the only
right
example of an adventurer.
notable
in his
ancestor
family.
that he has worth bragging about. Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to say, I had a mother once, Belladonna Took,
Right.
who was a fabulous daughter of the old Took.
Right. Yeah. One of the remarkable daughters. Yeah.
Yeah. He should say, I had a fairy ancestor once, but anyway.
Yeah.
So, of course, Glowin tells him, no, there really is a sign. And by the way, the sign is much more complex than I originally thought. I just thought it was the Gandalf rune, but it's apparently burglar wants a good job, plenty of excitement, and reasonable reward.
Yeah.
That's quite a
That's
scrawl.
a lot to have scratched into the door.
Yeah, I really think like Gandalf owes him a paint job.
Yeah.
So anyway, they get the Gandalf's defense of his choice, and we're not going to again go into too much detail there, but I love this. He's basically telling him, "Look, I've chosen him, and that needs to be enough for you.
That should be enough. Yeah.
I'm Gandalf." And I love this line. I will read it. If I say he's a burglar, then a burglar he is, or he will be when the time comes. And boy, that is an important qualifier, isn't it?
That is a very important qualifier, yeah.
And he even reminds them, look, there's more to him than you know, and there's more to him than he knows.
Than he even knows himself, yep.
So, and then we finally start to get a little control over this meeting.
And I think the importance of that qualifier is just, hey, he may not be a burglar yet, but he will find it.
Yeah. By the time you get to Erebor, he will either be dead or he'll be a burglar.
Yep.
I mean, really, this is survival of the fittest, folks.
Yep.
So then we get into the details. We get the plan, starts coming out. He pulls out the map.
Oh, the map.
He tells him, "Hey, this map was made by your grandfather." Mm-hmm. And then you've got something to read for us.
Yep. "There is one point that you haven't noticed," said the wizard, "and that is the secret entrance. You see that rune on the west side, and the hand pointing to it from the other runes? That marks a hidden passage to the lower halls. Look at the map at the beginning of this book, and you will see there the runes." "It may have been secret once," said Thorin. "But how do we know that it is secret any longer? Old Smaug has lived there long enough now to find out anything there is to know about those caves." "He may, but he can't have used it for years and years." "Why?" "Because it is too small. 5 feet high at the door, and 3 may walk abreast, say the runes. But Smaug could not creep into a hole that size, not even when he was a young dragon, certainly not after devouring so many of the dwarves and men of Dale."
Well, are you saying Smaug needs to lose weight?
He's not going to say that to his face. Probably not.
You're not going to say that to him.
He needs to eat a salad like Bomber did.
Like Bomber, you're right. He needs to start getting into shape.
Yeah.
First off, we get that wonderful aside. Look at the map at the beginning of this book. So once again, the narrator is directly addressing the reader. Telling them where to go to look at this map. And then we get another little trick of his. We talked about how he has this tendency to make dangerous situations seem a little less serious. Mm-hmm. So even when he's talking about the dragon eating people, he just makes it sound like, well,
he's gained so much weight from eating all these people.
Weight. He's a little chubby now.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a hobbit in that regard. Mm-hmm. From eating people, really.
Right.
But he kind of blows it off like,
right.
Like,
he doesn't focus on he's eaten so many, poor young men and women.
He's torn them from limb to limb and shredded them with his teeth.
He doesn't go into the horror. They look like chunky
salsa when he's done. And it's just...
Oh, man. He doesn't go into the gruesome details.
No, he doesn't get gory about it.
No, he's just like, hey, he's eaten so many people. He cannot possibly get through that
And
hole.
that is a pretty small hole for a dragon. 5 feet high.
5 feet high.
You and I would have to duck, and I'd feel very claustrophobic. Well, I would have to duck. I'm not sure about you.
I would have to duck.
Sorry.
Hey. I'm
You're
short, but I'm not that.
Uptake there, buddy.
I'm short, but I'm not that. No, I was actually trying to figure out how wide it was if 3 may walk abreast.
I know.
It's probably about
I'm figuring
9
to 10 feet. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I was too busy thinking about that I missed it. When you said I'm dwarf-sized. I'm short, but I'm not that short.
I know.
I'm close.
I'm not very tall. I'm not very tall either. But yeah, that would feel pretty claustrophobic, frankly, at that size. Yeah. And I'm just a human, not a dragon. 3 may walk abreast. Yeah, I think you're right. Probably 9 to 10 feet wide. Especially dwarves, probably closer to 10 feet. They're big, stocky.
That's
dudes.
true. They're broad. Yeah.
So so Bilbo, of course, thinks that's a big hole.
Yeah.
But
I want to spend a moment on these runes. Because I just think it's worth pointing out. We talk so much about the different scripts and things of Tolkien's world. I think it's worth noting to anybody who doesn't know already, and this is probably something a lot of people have picked up on, but the runes on Thror's map are actually not the Caerthas, the Elvish runes that are in the back of Lord of the Rings. They're actually he's taken Anglo-Saxon runes, Old English runes, and used those for this map. The runes they call the Futhorc.
Okay.
And he's basically taken those runes.
You were just looking for an excuse to get an Old English word in, weren't you?
Yeah, I was, because I usually butcher the pronunciations so much. I can't wait to see. I wanted to see how badly I would do with this one. Futhorc, I think it is.
I think so.
But so these are like basically just the runes that were once used to write Old English. And
right.
And what's interesting about that is, again, it's just another, it's further evidence of this idea that this has been translated. You know, he's taken a Westron language and a Westron runic script, and he's translated it into English, written in an English runic script. It's just another way that he sort of brings it down to the level of, you know, maybe children or somebody who's new to this world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's you know, it's, and I guess I should, you know, point out, like, it's not, even for dwarvish runes that are used in Lord of the Rings, like I'm thinking of the runes on Balin's tomb and Moria, those are different. Those are not the same as these runes. Those are actually based on those Elvish runes, the Caerthas of Dairon. So I just wanted to point that out briefly. It's a runic script that's pretty easy to learn, just, you know, by going out and just like looking up the Anglo-Saxon runes, things like that. But it was the first runic script that I learned. I'll put it that way.
You've learned a runic script?
I learned this one, and then I was fairly proficient in the Caerthas for a while in high school.
Yeah. No, I think I remember practicing the Caerthas quite a few times. I think they were written on most of my Peachy folders.
Yeah, right. Any of my Trapper Keepers and stuff like that, they were used to be covered with Tengwar and runes and things like that.
I love that. So we learn a little bit more about the nature of dwarvish doors. We get the key. So, you know, we're kind of moving here because we want to make sure we get through to the end of the tale. But the key, now it's interesting. I remember, I'll have to look up the actual years, but I remember looking at the timeline and that Gandalf ends up visiting, like he's just stopping by for a visit in jail. He ends up, you know, getting into Dol Guldur, you know, and finding Thrain and getting the map and the key some like 80 years before this moment. I mean, it wasn't like he did this last week, you know?
Yeah.
But then, of course, Smaug has been in the mountain now for well over 100 years at this point. So a lot of time has passed since. And that's something else to keep in mind when we're reading that song, reading the poetry. A lot of time has passed since that dragon attack, and yet it features so strongly still in their history and in their songs.
2850.
Okay.
When Gandalf when Gandalf went to Dol Guldur and found Thrain.
And what year are we in here at the beginning of The Hobbit?
This is 29.
2950 something.
2941.
40. Okay, 2941. Wow. So 71 years. He's had the map and the key.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, he just wanted to hold on to it. But
well, that's interesting. Wait, 2850.
Isn't it?
So when did
I think he was waiting for the right moment, you know?
Thrain died in 2850, and this is 2941. Doesn't Gandalf make a comment about Thrain having died 100 years ago?
No, he makes a comment about him having left.
Oh, that's it.
We'll get to that. Yeah, but we'll get to that.
Thank you. I was like, wait, am I losing it?
No.
Have
maybe,
I completely
but not
forgotten how to
related
do
this.
math?
Well, that's possible. So they talk about possible plans about how they might get there, and eventually, you know, Thorin's like, well, we could just go straight up there, you know, into the south of the mountain. But Gandalf, that would be no good, said the wizard. Not without a mighty warrior, even a hero. I tried to find one, but warriors are busy fighting one another in distant lands, and in this neighborhood, heroes are scarce or simply not to be found. Swords in these parts are mostly blunt, and axes are used for trees, and shields as cradles or dish covers, and dragons are comfortably far off and therefore legendary. That is why I settled on burglary, especially when I remembered the existence of a side door. And here is our little Bilbo Baggins, the burglar, the chosen and selected burglar. So now let's get on and make some plans. Very well, then, said Thorin. Supposing the burglar expert gives us some ideas or suggestions. He turned with mock politeness to Bilbo. First, I should like to know a bit more about things, said he, feeling all confused and a bit shaky inside, but so far still tookishly determined to go on with things. I mean about the gold and the dragon and all that, and how it got there and who it belongs to, and so on and further. Bless me, said Thorin. Haven't you got a map? And didn't you hear our song? And haven't we been talking about all this for hours? All the same, I should like it all plain and clear, said he obstinately, putting on his business manner, usually reserved for people who try to borrow money off him, and doing his best to appear wise and prudent and professional, and live up to Gandalf's recommendation. Also, I should like to know about risks, out-of-pocket expenses, time required, and remuneration, and so forth. By which he meant, what am I going to get out of it, and am I going to come back alive? Which is a valid question, I must add.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I find it interesting that this is one of those, hey, the movie was really different. It's Bilbo who brings up the kind of contractual details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's the one who wants to know the specifics. Mm-hmm. So the dwarves, having him...
the dwarves come across
becomes...
The dwarves come across as kind of... what's the word? Kind of unrealistic. They're not really thinking about the details. They're kind of pie in the sky about the whole thing.
They really are, very much so.
And Bilbo is it's very hobbitish, very businesslike. It's very very modern in a way. To want to know all this stuff. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So the idea of
and he's doing it partly to appear wise and prudent and professional and live up to Gandalf's recommendation, which I think is really, really interesting.
It is interesting. And later
he now cares what Gandalf thinks of him.
He does care what Gandalf thinks because Gandalf has recommended him. There's a little little pride there.
Yeah.
I like the mock politeness. We get that. That's key.
Mock politeness is brilliant.
Mock politeness because we'll see a lot of mock stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. There's that sarcasm that we were talking about, and it's interesting because politeness is kind of all Bilbo has right now, mm-hmm. and Thorin is just kind of mocking him.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm gonna back up really quickly before your passage. I just noticed something looking at this. Before that, they were looking at the map. They were talking about Thorin said we would go east as far as the Long Lake. After that, the trouble would begin. And Gandalf said a long time before that, if I know anything about the roads east.
Yes.
And then Thorin takes no notice.
None at all. Yeah, he just ignores that.
He ignores good counsel, doesn't he? He doesn't listen to counsel.
Many times.
And I just picked up on that. It's like, what have we said about people who don't listen to sound counsel?
Usually bad things happen.
Never a way to succeed in Middle-earth.
Yeah, especially when you're turning down counsel from Gandalf.
Yes. The man knows what he's talking about.
He certainly does.
The wizard knows what he's talking about.
Wizards usually do. Mm-hmm. I also noticed another use of the word comfort, that dragons are comfortably far off and therefore legendary. Again, the idea is that comfort, we come back to that again, the fact that these threats are not present, therefore people can be comfortable and think of them as imaginary.
Yeah.
So we get... We get Bilbo demanding the details. So later, when he gets the little letter that we'll see in the next chapter, the contract that the movie made such a big fuss out of, that's sarcastic. That's just intended to kind of poke fun at Bilbo's demand to know about risks and out-of-pocket expenses and remuneration.
Yeah, that's a key point.
It really is. The dwarves aren't, making
the dwarves
some
are not
grand
business-like
plan with
in that
contracts.
way. Yeah.
No, they're not. They're just, let's get this job done. So, so then we get the backstory.
It's interesting how he's when he specifically asks who it belongs to.
Yes.
There's a
Have you really
subtle.
not been paying attention?
Yeah, but there's a subtle thing in there. He wants to make sure that this is all on the level, and maybe it's that word burglar that has kind of tipped him off. Like, am I actually stealing something?
Am I doing something wrong?
Does this really belong to you guys? And
that's a good point. You're right. I think he does want to be. This is all on the up and up.
Yeah.
So then we get the actual backstory, and we're not going to read this. We're going to get a little bit later, but we get this really a strong sense of pride. We get this desire to reclaim the old days. He talks about, my goodness, he talks about a whole lot of things. I love this. The toy market of Dale is the wonder of the North. I love that line because, again, it's a nod to the fact that, this is a kid's story.
This is a kid's story, yeah.
And that seems to be
the toy market.
Exactly. And it's right after that undoubtedly that was what brought the dragon.
The toys.
It sure seems that way. I mean, I
or maybe the armor and the jewels and the carvings and the cups, maybe.
Right. But it's right after that, right? He talks about Yeah, but the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the North. Not to talk about the most marvelous and magical toys. But so, I mean, obviously the dragons were, very interested in that.
You're not kidding about the sense of nostalgia. I mean, when he's talking about, kings used to send for us smiths. I mean, that's a lot of they would reward even the least skillful, the most richly.
Pay us handsomely.
Yeah.
immensely rich and famous, great reverence by the mortal men. Really, I mean, the poorest of us had money to spend and to lend and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
My goodness, that's a pretty high level of success for that culture.
Yeah. And then there's a real sense of what's been lost. They're not what they used to be.
Well,
Reminds me a bit of Londo Mollari from Babylon 5. That I want us to be what we used to be.
Can you take care of that, Mr. Morden?
Mr. Morden.
Yes, he can. He'll take care of Sector 39 tomorrow. Or is it Sector 39, Sector 37? I don't remember.
One of those, yeah.
One of those.
Yeah.
He'll just take care of it.
Babylon 5, Season 1.
Yeah. The very end. You're right. Good stuff. Man, I love that show.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then we get the dragon, the attack of the dragon, and the fact that he drove them all away, killed most of them, and that he is probably sleeping on a pile of gold that he's heaped up for himself. But he does come out still and carry people away to eat until Dale just disappeared.
Yes.
The good clue number one that you shouldn't be in this neighborhood anymore is, well, every once in a while a dragon flies by and eats somebody.
It's
property values are down.
Just are not what they used to be.
No. Well, can't sell this house. Had it listed for 6 months.
Nope.
No offers. Yeah. So,
honey, there's a dragon in that mountain. Did you hear that? There's a dragon up there.
There's a dragon.
It's imagining the couple going to buy this house in Dale and.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, it's so cute. It's a nice little 3-bedroom. I mean, there's some burn marks, but, it's mostly good. It's in good shape. It's a fixer-upper. But, yeah, the neighborhood's really gone downhill.
Oh,
and the steel bars on your windows aren't going to help.
No.
Not at all.
Not one bit.
So Thorin does acknowledge that, look, hey, we still have some wealth. We have a good bit laid by, he says. But we still mean to get it back and to bring our curses home to Smaug.
Yeah,
if we can.
And there's that little bit of revenge.
Exactly. Exactly. And we'll get a little bit more of an idea of revenge here as you read the next passage about Thrain's story.
All right. I have often wondered about my father's and my grandfather's escape. I see now they must have had a private side door which only they knew about. But apparently they made a map, and I should like to know how Gandalf got hold of it, and why it did not come down to me, the rightful heir. I did not get hold of it, I was given it, said the wizard. Your grandfather, Thror, was killed, you remember, in the mines of Moria by Azog the Goblin. Curse his name, yes, said Thorin. And Thrain, your father, went away on the 21st of April, 100 years ago, last Thursday, and has never been seen by you since. True, said Thorin. Well, your father gave me this to give to you, and if I have chosen my own time and way for handing it over, you can hardly blame me, considering the trouble I had to find you. Your father could not remember his own name when he gave me the paper, and he never told me yours, so on the whole, I think I ought to be praised and thanked. Here it is, said he, handing the map to Thorin. I don't understand, said Thorin. And Bilbo felt he would have liked to say the same. The explanation did not seem to explain. Your grandfather, said the wizard slowly and grimly, gave the map to his son for safety before he went to the mines of Moria. Your father went away to try his luck with the map after your grandfather was killed, and lots of adventures of a most unpleasant sort he had, but he never got near the mountain. How he got there, I don't know, but I found him a prisoner in the dungeons of the necromancer.
And you can almost hear the dum-dum-dum.
Yeah.
There's a lot in this passage, really. First of all, we're reminded that Azog killed Thror, and so clearly is not still around.
No.
In fact, we know that he's dead by this point. I love this phrase. Thrain went away 100 years ago last Thursday. It's almost like the Awkward Wednesday bit, right?
Yeah.
It's this, and really, it's 100 years ago just the other day? Precisely? That's amazing.
Quite a coincidence, yeah.
Yeah, a little quinky-dink there.
Yeah. And there's the 100 years I was looking for. Thank you for
that's the line you were.
That actually was.
Exactly. I love Gandalf's little attitude. Like, well, really, you should be thanking me.
You should be thanking me.
Grief.
Yeah. Well, because this is Thorin's greed and pride of birthright coming out in sort of the most pernicious way. He's Gandalf is the guy who's trying to help you, and all you can do is think of like, well, how did you get your hands on this? Like you
should have given it to me right away, but he didn't know it was his to give.
Right.
I mean, he didn't know who to give it to. Right. I mean, Thrain didn't know his own name. He certainly didn't tell him Thorin's name, so he had to figure all that on his own.
Right. He did quite well.
Yeah, really. I mean, it only took him 71 years to figure it out. Not bad.
Yeah.
My goodness, found him a prisoner in the dungeons of the necromancer. So we do get, the text goes on to talk about basically Thorin being, well, we should take, we should go to give him a little action.
Oh yeah, we should give some thought to him.
Gandalf's
like, no.
That is way beyond you. Wait, let's do the line. This is a foe beyond any of you. Fly.
Fly. Yeah. An enemy far beyond the powers of all the dwarves put together.
If they could all be collected again from the four corners of the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll have to look at the first edition to see if the necromancer was put in that strong of a if it was described that strongly. Because, of course, in the first edition, he wasn't anybody but the necromancer. And it's only here in the most recent version, after The Lord of the Rings came out, that, Tolkien is seeing him as Sauron. So we'll have to look that up.
I wonder, though. I wonder, because, I mean, he had been working on Beren and Luthien. I mean, he knew about, he was calling him Thu at the time, but there was the necromancer character. So I wonder if he actually was maybe inspired by that, even if he hadn't quite equated him yet.
Yeah, that may be.
That'd be something worth looking into.
That'll be worth looking into maybe for a postscript.
Yeah. But it's a great little bit of foreboding, that
isn't it?
He mentions, and it's one of those things that makes the world feel bigger, and obviously we'll get more of Sauron in Lord of the Rings, but at this point it's just, the necromancer, and you don't really know much else about him except that he's just sort of looming on the fringes of this story.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it. So we do get that Bilbo then has a plan. So he suggests that they go, to the side door, and that they'll sit around and think about something. We'll think of something when we're there. It's not much of a plan, really, frankly.
Yeah.
But he's basically saying that.
Enough. We'll think of something.
I think he's saying that basically to say, let's wrap this up, because right after that he's like, I think we talked long enough for one night, if you see what I mean. What about bed and an early start and all that?
Yeah.
And then I love this. I will give you a good breakfast before you go.
Right, yeah. And get out of my lives forever. Get out of my life
exactly.
forever. Yeah.
Thorin will have none of it, saying, you mean before we go?
Before we go, I suppose you mean.
And then he gives him perhaps the tastiest breakfast order I've seen, but one that's probably going to jump his cholesterol numbers. I like 6 eggs with my ham. Fried, not poached, and mine don't break them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of the chapter, and then we'll discuss that. After all the others had ordered their breakfast without so much as a please, which annoyed Bilbo very much. Again, there's the manners thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the courtesy.
They all got up. The Hobbit had to find room for them all, and filled all his spare rooms and made beds on chairs and sofas before he got them all stowed and went to his own little bed very tired and not altogether happy. One thing he did make his mind up about was not to bother to get up very early and cook everybody else's wretched breakfast. The Tookishness was wearing off, and he was not now quite so sure that he was going on any journey in the morning. As he lay in bed, he could hear Thorin still humming to himself in the best bedroom next to him. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to find our long-forgotten gold. Bilbo went to sleep with that in his ears, and it gave him very uncomfortable dreams. It was long after the break of day when he woke up. And like we said, the chapter practically ends with uncomfortable.
With this uncomfort, discomfort.
Yeah. And it's all because of the dwarvish song, the dwarvish gold, and this mission. I love the humor of the passage, though. I got to admit. Everybody else's wretched
I'm not going to make their wretched breakfast.
Awesome.
It's interesting, though, that the structure of this closing, this very Baggins-ish, first paragraph. The Tookishness is wearing off, but then what do we end on? We end on, this. We end on him listening to this song that awoke the Took in him, and he's going to sleep with that in his ears. He can't escape it.
No.
It is long after the break of day when he wakes up. So he's already sort of failing to live up to the promise of the poem.
Yeah.
Because he's not going away before break of day. But still, he's going to sleep with this in his ears, and we should not be surprised when the Tookish part of him wakes up again.
Absolutely. Oh, and I want to point out one other little Hobbit, propriety thing. We already talked about how it really bugged him that they didn't say please even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Notice that when he laid in bed, he could hear Thorin humming in the best bedroom next to him.
Yeah.
So he gave Thorin the
his
primo bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't pick up on that. I was always thinking of it as sort of like, the best guest bedroom, but no, it's the best bedroom.
I'm not sure. I think it's the best bedroom.
I think you're right. I think he gave Thorin his bed.
Because here he did go to his own little bed, very tired, but I think that's his, like, a little bed. It's like, as opposed to his own big bed, which Thorin is in the best bedroom next to him.
Oh,
I don't know, but
I don't know.
It's certainly very propriety.
He's definitely given a place of honor, for sure.
He does. And even though he's still not going to get up and make them breakfast, which I love. It's like, fine, I'll get you all places to sleep, but I'm darned if I'm going to make you breakfast.
Yep.
Oh,
that's
goodness.
Fantastic.
That was a great discussion, Sean. Folks, be sure to join us again in 1 week. That's right, you heard correctly. We talked about this briefly at the beginning of the show. Our Patreon campaign has reached our second goal, so we are going to start releasing episodes weekly, as long and as often as we are able.
Yep, so you can ignore what I said last time about this episode, about the next episode being 2 weeks away. You won't have to wait those interminable 2-week waits anymore.
That's right. And be sure to tune in next week when we'll spot trolls long before the internet made them popular. Before we wrap up with a question or two from Bartleman's Bag, if you believe we've earned your support here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we would ask you to please consider joining our Patreon family at patreon.com/prancingponypod. It's thanks to our Patreon family that we're able to make this move to weekly, and we have another big goal down the road a ways, not to mention some really fun and cool rewards, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do want to take a moment to thank those of you who've already joined the fellowship of the podcast. You are helping to make this show even better, and we really appreciate that. And a very special shout out to Maya in Michigan and Jason in British Columbia, our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier. And if you want a personalized shout out on our episodes, well, now you know where to go.
That's right. And while your patronage is really appreciated, we don't want you to feel obligated. Only if you can afford it, and only if you think we've earned it, do we want you to consider signing up. Otherwise, just keep enjoying the podcast, because we're going to keep making it.
Yeah, although we could still use a little help on the survey from our podcast host. It is really, really short, not even 30 seconds, and it will help us understand our audience a bit better. I promise we will stop mentioning this once we get to 250. So please visit survey.libsyn, that's LIBSYN.com/The Prancing Pony Podcast, and please help us out.
Absolutely. The demographic data that they're asking for, it's only collected in aggregate, and Sean and I are the only ones who are going to get your email addresses. Once we get 250 completed surveys, we're going to do a drawing from all the email addresses. We'll be giving away a copy of the new Baird and Luthien book and a first edition facsimile edition of The Hobbit. Again, we're asking that to be for U.S. residents only, please, just because of shipping costs. Please check out our show notes for a link if you missed it. Sean, do we have any questions in Bartleman's Bag this time around?
Yeah, we've got two that I think we can get through in the time we have left. First one comes to us from Christopher B. in Michigan. He's one of our patrons. And remember that priority handling of your questions to Bartleman's Bag is one perk of joining the fellowship at the Legacy of Lothlorien level or higher. One thing drives out another where Bartleman is concerned. So definitely making it worth your while with that priority access.
Bob and Knob will remind him.
Yes, exactly. So Christopher wrote to us saying, really more of a comment than a question. And it is kind of long, but I really want to read the whole thing because I really love it, or I guess I'll read most of it, almost the whole thing. Christopher said, I was struck with a thought while listening to your review of the Lord of the Rings movies on the last episode. So this would have been episode 50. You were commenting on the semi-lameness of having Pippin light the beacon fire, with lots of excellent discussion about what it said about Denethor. Thank you, Christopher. I agree with a lot of what you said, but I did think of something worth pointing out, or so I believe. This isn't the first significant thing Pippin has lit on fire. There's his introduction scene in the Fellowship movie, where he and Merry have some fun with Gandalf's fireworks. I think we're seeing a callback and contrast between these two pyro scenes, possibly as a shortcut for indicating that Pippin is growing up. I also wanted to react to your discussion of the Pippin sings while everybody dies scene. It's so interesting how we experience that differently, he says. I am blind and was thus unaware of the Denethor food porn. For me, this was simply a scene of haunting music, inappropriate to the lyrics, it's true, set against the tension building of Howard Shore's score. And that moment when all the music goes away before Pippin sings Fade still raises the hair on the back of my neck to this day.
Oh, yeah.
Finally, I wanted just to remind people of what it was like the first time Annie Lennox began singing at the end of Return of the King. It's been most of 14 years since most of us experienced that for the first time. Do you remember sitting in the theater with tears running down your face? I know that all of us in the theater on that December morning in 2003 when I saw it for the first time lingered in a group, sharing the truth of Gandalf's parting statement, "I will not say, do not weep," and forward. We had shared something remarkable. And if you were there on opening day, you probably had been waiting for the Jackson movies for many years, or were being introduced to Tolkien through them. I can't speak for other people's experience, but we in that theater got to feel something of Sam's grief and return to the loving arms of Rose Cotton. This amazing odyssey we'd been on for 3 years was over. You would never see that movie again for the first time. Yeah. And so we wept and lingered. I still tear up when Annie Lennox begins singing and the horns swell into the Going West theme.
Yeah.
And so, while they weren't perfect, and while we can mourn for the Faramir we never got to see, and even more, while the Hobbit movies were a net negative in the world, let us raise a toast to all who had a hand in the making of these epics, that let us feel the sorrow of the elves and the joy of a homegoing Hobbit. There will never be their like again, though others may well go at it from other points of view. Christopher, thank you so much for that. Beautifully said. Going back to the very beginning, first of all, your observation about the beacons showing Pippin growing up, I think you're really onto something there. He's setting a fire for a productive purpose instead of just to make mischief. I think that's a really brilliant insight.
That is a good catch.
And I appreciate you sharing that with us. As for the rest of it, absolutely, yes, I do agree. Despite their flaws, there's so much good there. There's so much emotional impact, especially of the Lord of the Rings movies specifically. And I just wanted to share that here on the show. Again, thank you all for allowing me to read something kind of long, because I just really wanted everybody to hear that, and I want everyone to know that we do love the movies. We love the Lord of the Rings movies, especially, and to kind of put those discussions kind of behind us on a positive note. There was a lot of we engaged in a lot of criticism. I think rightly so. We criticized them from a place of love, but I think Christopher, while sharing in some of our criticism, has really hit on the pure joy and the pure beauty and effect that those movies had on us the first time.
Some of the community.
Sense of community. And I absolutely remember that. I remember going to see those movies for the first time. I remember seeing Return of the King. I had 2 different sneak preview opportunities before it actually came out, and I went to see it twice before it even came out. And then I did the marathon, where they showed all 3 movies in the theater on opening day. And you're right, Christopher. Absolutely, I still feel that way every time I hear that, and I think it's an important note that you brought up. So really, thank you for that. And let's raise a toast for the effort that was put into them.
Cheers. I agree. That Pippin observation is an absolutely brilliant catch. And on the subject of Pippin again, that musical scene, the scene with what he called the Denethor food porn. That song still haunts me. Not surprisingly, the complete edition of the score is in heavy rotation around here, and that song always makes me stop for a moment. To be honest, I often sing along, even if logic and good taste suggest I shouldn't.
We need some recordings of that.
No, you do not. You do not. Without a doubt, the moment that Annie Lennox begins singing Into the West still holds truly bittersweet memories for me. Every time I hear it, vividly recall sitting in the theater. This was at Big Newport in Newport Beach, California, for a midnight showing, so it would have been around 3 a.m., something like that, maybe 3:15, and watching Return of the King for the first time and realizing what a tremendous experience I'd had over the past 2 years. Talking with the local members of the OneRing.net group and knowing what we'd all shared as a community. And that community's still around, of course. Like I said, I'd gone up to the Baggins birthday bash up in L.A., and so, I know the community's still there, but it's not quite the same. That film, that moment, that was an emotional moment. And even now, not only does Into the West still bring tears to my eyes, but there's a moment where you hear that theme played earlier in the movie, where the first time you watched the movie, you didn't notice it because you didn't know that theme yet.
You didn't know what it was.
And it's in that moment when Gandalf and Pippin are talking about death and, the trolls on the other side of that door.
Yeah.
Listen to that, and you'll hear the first few notes of Into the West playing in the background. And that just totally triggers the memory of that song and the recollection of those beautiful hand-drawn credits with the
those were so
the
cool,
illustrations, the Alan Lee illustrations.
Yeah.
So every time I hear that song, it just brings tears to my eyes.
I remember sitting there just like staring at the screen through those credits.
Oh,
just,
totally.
I couldn't move. I remember the first time I saw that.
And I just remember thinking, like he said, we'll never see this for the first time again. And even now, it's still amazing, but it's not the amazing that it was that very first night. So thank you, Christopher, for taking the time to send in such a beautiful sentiment and giving us an opportunity to really say, farewell to the films on the podcast in a much more purely positive light. Sean, do we have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, we've got one just for fun here, kind of a short one. Mick T. in Drogheda, Ireland, asks...
I hope you're pronouncing that right. Did you ask him?
I did ask him how to pronounce it. He said Drogheda, yep.
Okay.
He asks how Bilbo kept food fresh without a refrigerator.
Wow, that's a good question.
I think he was, he's probably going for some questions that were kind of fun, knowing Mick. But I think it's a really good one anyway. I think the answer is right there in the text. Bilbo thinks at one point, and we talked about this last episode, that Gandalf seems to know as much about the inside of my larders as I do myself. So there's that word larders. He has larders. And larders, though they're not terribly common these days, they were common in houses before the invention of the refrigerator. It was basically the room where you kept your food. And they were actually constructed in ways that would actually keep the food fresh. I actually did some research on this.
Good for you.
There's some stuff in Wikipedia on this.
Of course.
Larders were constructed to be as cool as possible. They tended to put them on the side of the house that got the least amount of sun. They put them as low as possible to the ground so that the ground beneath it could kind of help maintain that cool temperature even in the summer. In some parts of England, they even had something that was called a thrall, Thrawl, which was like a big stone slab or shelf that helped keep food cool. So you could just put your meat there on the thrall, and that would kind of help keep it cool because, the large thermal mass, it wouldn't get as warm as the rest of the room would. So I think there's your answer.
Well, so they had those in parts of England, but not in Valinor, right? Because, we all know the Valar didn't keep thralls despite Feanor's claim to the contrary.
Oh, Alan.
That's a bad pun, Alan. Bad pun.
That is.
Well, that wraps it up on that wonderful note for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. And as always, we thank you very much for joining us. Be sure to join us again in a week when we start the second chapter.
We'll go straight from Bilbo's larder to a bit of tasty roast mutton.
That we will. And folks, we want to encourage you all to read along and take notes in your own copy of The Hobbit. So please check out the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. Sean's worked real hard recently to update the page, and we've got links to everything from inexpensive paperbacks to the really good stuff for your Tolkien collection.
And also, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review, we'd really be grateful for that. Those reviews help us get some more visibility in iTunes, and that translates to a bigger and just more vibrant Tolkien community.
And that is what we're about, the Tolkien community. So please definitely help us out with that. Make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to our podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can find us in just about every podcast directory, or if you like your podcast the old-fashioned way, the RSS feed is on our website. And by the time this episode airs, Apple and iOS 11 will be supporting some new RSS tags that allow us to better organize the show into seasons. So we're in season 2 now. as well as telling them, indicating that the show is serial and not episodic. That means that the oldest one will appear at the top of the list instead of the newest. So if you're really super organized, you're going to want to use Apple's new podcast app to follow us.
There you go. And we want to thank all of you who become part of our social media family. Again, community is so much what we're about here. And we really wanted to start a Tolkien conversation that everyone can join. That's why we have what we call our online common room, which is our Facebook page at The Prancing Pony Podcast and our Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
It's not on the Facebook this time?
It's not on the Facebook. I've learned my lesson.
I'm glad to hear that. One last thing as always, folks, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your ancient dwarven treasure maps to barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com. And that's our new email address, folks, so be sure to jot it down, barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com, and we'll try to get to them in our next episode. Well, an hour and a half is still far too short a time to spend amongst such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.